He covered his uncle's hospital shift and was mistaken for a surgeon, but the unexpected happened. Michael Thompson held the temporary badge in his trembling hands. He had agreed to cover his Uncle George's night shift as a janitor at Mercy General Hospital for just 1 week, while his relative recovered from a fall at home. Having graduated from nursing school only 6 months earlier, he still hadn't found a job in the field, and the bills kept piling up. It was during his 3rd night that the unexpected occurred. While cleaning the hallway near the surgical center, a hurried head nurse grabbed him by the arm. "Dr. Mitchell, finally. We've been waiting for you for almost an hour. The patient care's already prepped in room 3. Michael opened his mouth to correct the mistake, but he didn't get the chance. There had been a system error, and his temporary badge had been issued with the same code as the visiting surgeon they were expecting. Before he could explain, he was being pushed into a room full of doctors in an emergency meeting. "The patient is stable, but we need to make a decision in the next 30 minutes, said a middle-aged doctor, pointing to scans on a large monitor. Michael stood frozen near the door. His heart pounded so loudly he feared everyone in the room could hear it. He was only 28, and his entire experience amounted to his mandatory college internship and countless hours studying for exams. "Dr. Mitchell, we know you came from New York City specifically for this case. We'd like to hear your opinion," said an older man who appeared to be the clinical director. It was then that Michael saw the test results of an elderly woman on the screen. Even from where he stood, he recognized a pattern in the results, one very similar to a rare case he had studied for his final thesis. It was an uncommon metabolic syndrome easily mistaken for more severe conditions. His voice faltered. He tried again, barely above a whisper. "Have you considered the possibility of Hadley syndrome?" Silence filled the room. A young doctor sitting toward the back looked up curiously. "Hadley syndrome?" the director repeated. "That's extremely rare. What makes you suggest that?" Michael swallowed hard. There he was, a temporary janitor, standing among an elite medical team being treated like a renowned specialist. He should have confessed everything right then, but the words stuck in his throat. "The pattern of liver markers combined with the kidney function changes," he answered, summoning all the courage he could find. "I studied a similar case." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Michael stayed silent, responding with vague gestures when addressed. As soon as he could, he slipped into the hallways and ran to the staff locker room, where he hid for nearly an hour, trying to steady his breathing and decide what to do. When he finally stepped out, calmer and resolved to confess everything, to the administrative supervisor the next morning, he came face to face with the young doctor from the meeting. "Dr. Mitchell," she asked, clearly puzzled. "Can I speak with you for a minute?" "Actually, I'm Dr. Emily Parker, second year resident. That diagnosis you suggested, I'd never heard of it, but it makes perfect sense with Mrs. Margaret's condition." Michael felt the weight of guilt grow heavier. "Look, I need to confess something. I'm not—" Just then, they were interrupted by an overhead announcement calling for an emergency in the cardiology department. The young doctor gave him a hurried glance. "I have to go, but can we talk tomorrow? I'd really like to discuss this case further with you." Before Michael could respond, she had already disappeared down the hallway. He returned to his duties as a custodian, his mind in turmoil. How would he get out of this situation without harming his career before it even began? The next morning, Michael decided he would turn in his badge and explain everything to his supervisor. He couldn't keep up this charade. However, when he arrived at the hospital, he was met with a call from his Uncle George. The doctor had diagnosed a complication in his injury that would require surgery not covered by his insurance. The cost was exorbitant, and his uncle, who had always helped him, now needed him. With a heavy heart, Michael decided to stay in the temporary job a little longer. After all, he could avoid the department where the mix-up had happened and simply finish the week without further trouble. For the rest of the day, as he cleaned the hallways and replaced burnt-out light bulbs, Michael couldn't stop thinking about his uncle. George had been like a father to him ever since he lost his parents in an accident when he was just 12. It was his uncle who encouraged him to study, who worked 2 jobs to buy his school books, who celebrated with tears in his eyes when Michael was accepted into nursing school. "You'll be the first doctor in the family, my boy," George would say, though Michael always corrected him, explaining that nurses weren't called doctors. That night, alone in the small apartment he shared with his uncle in the Riverside neighborhood, one of the humblest in Boston, Michael flipped through his college notebook. He stopped at the pages about rare metabolic syndromes, his area of interest. He remembered how he spent nights studying at the public library since he couldn't afford all the recommended books. "Maybe I should have tried harder," he murmured. To himself, thinking of all the nursing positions he had applied for over the past 6 months without success. The next morning, Michael arrived at the hospital early, determined to focus solely on his custodial work and avoid any contact with the medical staff. What he didn't expect was running into Dr. Emily in the cafeteria during his break. "Finally, I found you," she said, sitting across from him. "I've been looking for you all day." Michael glanced around, making sure no one was paying attention to them. "Doctor, I really need to explain." "Mrs. Margaret's additional test results came in," she interrupted, excited. "And you know what? You were right. All the indicators point to Hadley syndrome. The clinical director was impressed and wants to discuss the case with you again." "Tomorrow." Michael felt his stomach drop. The situation was spiraling completely out of control. "I can't. I'm not who you think I am. There was a mistake and—" Emily's expression shifted from excitement to confusion. "What do you mean? You're not Dr. Mitchell from New York City?" "No," Michael finally managed to say. "My name is Michael Thompson. I have a nursing degree, but I'm covering my uncle's shift as a custodian. There was an error in the system with my temporary badge." The silence that followed was suffocating. Emily stared at him with wide eyes. Michael felt his stomach twist. Here he was, confessing to a fraud that could not only ruin his future chances in healthcare but also lead to legal consequences. He thought of his mother, Mary, who always told him that a man's character is revealed in the small decisions he makes when no one is watching. She would have been disappointed. "Are you telling me you participated in a medical meeting, offered a diagnosis for a critically ill patient, and you're not a doctor?" "I tried to say something, but no one gave me a chance," Michael replied, desperate. "I never meant to deceive anyone. I was going to confess everything to the supervisor today." To his surprise, instead of outrage, he saw a glimmer of curiosity in the doctor's eyes. "How do you know about Hadley syndrome? It's extremely rare." Michael sighed. "I wrote my thesis on rare metabolic disorders. I read over 70 case studies, including 3 on Hadley. The patient's symptoms and test markers matched exactly what I studied." Emily watched him for a long moment, as if sizing him up. "Mrs. Margaret was my old college professor," she finally said. "She's been suffering for months, and no specialist could identify the problem. You might have just saved her life." "But—" "I'm not a doctor," Michael insisted, panic rising in his voice. "No, you're not," Emily agreed, "but you know this specific case better than anyone here." She paused. "I have a proposal for you. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Emily's proposal was as risky as it was tempting. She would keep the secret about Michael's true identity if he continued to indirectly assist with Mrs. Margaret's case, acting as a kind of consultant through her. He could keep his job as a janitor during the day, but at night he would discreetly meet with Emily to review tests and discuss treatments. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Since childhood, his Aunt Rachel, his mother's sister, and an ethics teacher at the public school he attended had always emphasized the importance of honesty. One lie leads to another, and soon you find yourself in such a tangled web you can't find your way back, she used to say. But at the same time, Mrs. Margaret's case intrigued him professionally. It was exactly the kind of challenge that had fascinated him during his studies. And then there was the practical matter. He needed the money to help his uncle. "This is crazy," Michael argued, running his hand through his hair nervously. "If we get caught, we'll both lose everything. You're just starting your career, and I never really got to start mine. And if we do nothing, my professor could get worse," Emily countered, leaning across the table to speak more quietly. "Look, I know it feels wrong, but think about the circumstances. You have the knowledge that could help a suffering patient. Real knowledge, not made up. Michael studied Emily's face, noticing the genuine concern in her brown eyes. She truly cared about her professor. This wasn't just about proving something or advancing her career. It'll only be for a little. While Emily continued, just until we stabilize her condition and confirm the diagnosis. After that, you can go back to your life, and I'll say I consulted some scientific articles that helped me reach the conclusion. Michael's conscience screamed against the idea, but the thought of Uncle George needing that expensive surgery tormented him. Besides, he couldn't deny the genuine urge to help the patient. 1 week, he finally agreed. After that, it's over. And so began the strange partnership between the fake janitor and the young resident doctor. During the day, Michael mopped floors, changed light bulbs and emptied trash cans, his heart racing every time he passed a member of the medical staff. At night, in a tiny study room in the hospital basement, he and Emily pored over every detail of Mrs. Margaret's case. The room, barely bigger than a broom closet, held only a small table and 2 uncomfortable chairs. The dim glow of a yellowed light bulb created a clandestine atmosphere that only heightened the feeling they were doing something forbidden. Michael always arrived first, using back hallways to avoid being seen. That first night, the awkwardness between them was palpable. Emily tried to keep the relationship strictly professional, treating Michael almost like an outside consultant. She brought a folder with all the tests and medical reports, organized chronologically. These are the initial tests, from when she was admitted, showing the first symptoms, Emily explained, sliding some papers across the table. And these are the most recent ones, after we started the treatment based on your hypothesis. Michael studied the documents meticulously, comparing values and looking for patterns. He was genuinely absorbed, momentarily forgetting the strange circumstances that had brought him there. "Is the treatment following the standard protocol for Hadley syndrome?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the papers. "Yes, we're using the combination of methylprednisolone and azathioprine, as the literature recommends," Emily replied, surprised by his technical knowledge. Dr. Hendricks hesitated at first due to the side effects, but after reviewing the documented cases, he agreed. "And how is she responding?" "Better than we expected, actually." By the second night, the atmosphere was already more relaxed. Emily brought coffee for both of them, and between discussions about tests and medications, she asked Michael about his background. "How did you get interested in rare syndromes? It's not exactly the main focus in nursing." Michael smiled, reminiscing. "I had a professor in my second year, Dr. Williams, who was obsessed with atypical cases. He said any doctor or nurse can treat the common stuff, but the great professionals are the ones prepared for the unexpected. He lent me books, articles. I was fascinated." "And why did you choose to study Hadley syndrome specifically?" "It was by chance, really. I was researching for a paper on kidney failure when I came across a case study about a patient who was misdiagnosed for almost a year. By the time they figured out it was Hadley syndrome, it was too late to reverse some of the damage. I thought if there had been more information available, maybe that patient would have had a chance, so I decided to do my part by increasing knowledge about it." Emily looked at him with newfound respect. "You really care about this, don't you? It's not just a job for you." "It never was," Michael admitted. "I've always wanted to make a difference, even on a small scale." By the third night, their relationship had evolved into something close to a friendship. Emily arrived excited, holding a new set of tests. "The levels are responding well to the medication," she commented, showing the new results. "It was a brilliant intuition, Michael." "It wasn't intuition, it was study," he corrected, but couldn't help a satisfied smile. It was the first time in months he'd felt professionally fulfilled, even if the whole situation was a big lie. "You know, you'd make an excellent doctor," Emily remarked, organizing the papers at the end of the session. The comment, though probably well-intentioned, hit Michael like a punch to the gut. It was exactly what he'd always dreamed of hearing, but under the current circumstances it almost felt like cruelty. "Well, that's not going to happen," he replied curtly. "Why not? You already have a nursing degree." "It wouldn't be so hard to complete." "With what money, Emily? Michael interrupted, letting years of frustration show. "I finished nursing school with a partial scholarship and working overnight as a security guard. My uncle got sick right after, and the bills just keep piling up. Medical school is too distant a dream for someone in my situation." The silence that followed was awkward. Emily, coming from an upper-middle-class family, had clearly never had to worry about that kind of obstacle. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" "It's fine," Michael cut in, regretting the outburst. "Let's get back to the case. I think we should request a new full panel of inflammatory markers to monitor the immune response to the treatment." On the 5th day, Mrs. Margaret showed significant improvement, surprising the entire medical team. Her inflammatory marker levels had dropped considerably, and her kidney function showed clear signs of recovery. The news spread quickly through the hospital. The patient no specialist could correctly diagnose was responding to treatment. For Michael, who watched from a distance while continuing his duties as a janitor, it was a bittersweet feeling. On one hand, he felt genuine pride for helping save a life. On the other, the weight of the lie grew harder to bear each day. On the morning of the 5th day, while cleaning the windows in the main hallway, Michael observed Mrs. Margaret's morning rounds from afar. A small crowd of doctors and residents gathered around the elderly woman's bed, all eager to witness what was being called an extraordinary case in the hospital corridors. The clinical director, Dr. Richard Hendricks, a tall, thin man with neatly trimmed grey hair, led the visit. Michael knew his reputation: strict, meticulous, and with zero tolerance for mistakes or broken protocols. He was exactly the kind of person Michael feared most in this situation. "The improvement is truly remarkable," Dr. Hendricks remarked, reviewing the latest tests. "Dr. Parker, can you explain to the team how you arrived at this diagnosis? When so many specialists failed?" Emily swallowed hard. Her young face struggled to maintain professional composure, but Michael, even from a distance, could sense her discomfort. "Well, sir, it was a multifactorial approach," she began, choosing her words carefully. "I reviewed all the literature on atypical cases with similar presentations and correlated them with the patient's specific test patterns." The director watched her intently, as if he knew there was more to the story. "And that's all?" Because the change in therapeutic approach was quite specific and unconventional. Emily adjusted the stethoscope around her neck, a nervous gesture Michael had noticed during their secret meetings. "I consulted some recent studies and had guidance from Dr. Mitchell," she vaguely explained during morning rounds. The director raised an eyebrow, and an uncomfortable silence fell over the group. "Interesting," he finally replied, his tone a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Because the real Dr. William Mitchell just arrived from New York City and is quite confused about why everyone is congratulating him for a diagnosis he didn't make." Emily's heart raced. The charade was about to collapse. That same day, during her break, she rushed to find Michael. "We're in trouble," she said, pulling him into a secluded corner of the outdoor courtyard. "The real Dr. Mitchell is here." Michael felt his blood run cold. "I knew this would happen. I need to leave right now." "You can't!" Emily grabbed his arm. "If you disappear right now, it'll look even more suspicious. Then what do you suggest? That I keep pretending to be someone I'm not?" Before they could continue the argument, Michael's phone rang. It was St. Jude Municipal, a hospital where his uncle was admitted. The surgery needed to be performed urgently, and the first payment was due within 3 days. The amount was even higher than initially expected. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He was trapped in an impossible dilemma. If he stayed at the hospital, he risked being exposed and possibly sued. If he left, he wouldn't be able to pay for his uncle's surgery, the man who had supported him since his parents' death. To make matters worse, something unexpected happened. Emily sought him out the next morning with an expression that mixed anxiety and hope. "I have a new proposal," she said, after making sure they were alone. "The hospital is opening positions for research assistants. With your nursing background and your knowledge of rare syndromes, you'd be perfect. I could recommend you." "But how would you explain knowing me?" Michael questioned. "I'd say we met in college." A half-truth. "That would still be lying." It would be a chance for you to use your real knowledge, this time legitimately. Michael reflected on the offer. Working officially at the hospital, using his own identity and qualifications, would be a dream. The salary would be enough to help his uncle, but there was still the problem of explaining his previous presence as Dr. Mitchell. "I need to think," he finally replied. The following days were filled with intense anguish for Michael. He continued working as a janitor, avoiding the busier areas of the hospital. Emily kept him updated on Mrs. Margaret's condition, which was steadily improving. The treatment was working. On Friday evening, as the hospital slowed down, Michael's worst fear came true. While cleaning the hallway near the ICU, he heard an alarm coming from Mrs. Margaret's room. There were no doctors or nurses in sight at that moment. Without a second thought, Michael dropped the mop and ran to the room. The elderly woman was having a seizure. Drawing on his training experience, he quickly adjusted her position, checked her vitals, and administered oxygen, buying precious time until the medical team arrived. When the professionals got there, they found Michael performing basic emergency procedures with surprising competence for a supposed janitor. Among them was Dr. Richard Hendricks, who watched the scene with clear confusion. "What's going on here?" the director asked as the team took over. Michael knew there was no way out now. "I can explain, doctor, but I think it's better we do this privately." 20 minutes later in his office, Dr. Hendricks listened carefully as Michael told the whole truth. The initial mix-up with the badge, the diagnosis during the meeting, the secret partnership with Emily, everything. "I understand I deserve to be fired and possibly sued," Michael concluded. "But I need you to know I never intended to put any patient at risk. Everything I did was based on my real knowledge." The director studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You know you could have caused irreparable harm if you'd made a wrong diagnosis, don't you?" "Yes, sir, and I've carried that weight every day." "On the other hand," the doctor continued, "you identified a condition that specialists with decades of experience couldn't, and you just saved a patient's life by acting quickly." Michael waited tense for the final verdict. "I have two options," said Dr. Hendricks. "Report you for fraud and risk this hospital's reputation, or find a solution that acknowledges your talent while correcting your mistake. I don't understand. I'm willing to give you an ultimatum, reveal the whole truth to the team and face the consequences together, or leave this hospital immediately and never return." Michael swallowed hard. Neither option seemed good. "If I choose to reveal the truth, then I'll fight for you to have a chance. I can't promise anything, but I believe in giving opportunities to people with potential." After a few moments of reflection, Michael made his decision. "I want to face the consequences. I'm tired of lying." The next morning, an emergency meeting was called. Everyone involved in Mrs. Margaret's case was present, including Emily, who seemed as nervous as Michael. The director briefly explained the situation, causing a murmur of indignation among those gathered. "How could you let this happen?" questioned one of the older doctors. "It's a violation of every ethical principle." "It's not his fault," Emily intervened, standing up. "I was the one who convinced him to continue." "No, the responsibility is mine," Michael countered. "I could have said no." The heated discussion was interrupted by the unexpected entrance of Mrs. Margaret, now strong enough to walk with the help of a nurse. "May I join this conversation?" the elderly woman asked calmly. "After all, you're discussing my case, aren't you?" A respectful silence fell over the room as she settled into a chair. "So you're the fake doctor who figured out what I had?" she asked, looking directly at Michael. "Yes, ma'am, and I apologize for the deception." To everyone's surprise, Mrs. Margaret smiled. "I knew from the beginning, young man." The revelation caused widespread astonishment. "What do you mean you knew?" asked Dr. Hendricks. "I was a medical professor for 40 years, she explained. "I can recognize a nervous student when I see one. Your hands shook too much to be an experienced surgeon, and you avoided technical terms in conversations." Michael didn't know whether to feel relief or even more ashamed. "If you knew, why didn't you say anything?" he asked. "Because it was working," the elderly woman replied simply. "After months of suffering, someone finally had a theory that made sense. I wasn't going to interrupt my own treatment over Formalities. Mrs. Margaret's statement changed the tone of the meeting. Instead of a trial, it became a discussion about how the hospital system sometimes failed to recognize unconventional talents and how rigid procedures could hinder patient care. Still, Dr. Hendricks interjected, we can't simply ignore what happened. We need a solution that respects the institution's rules while acknowledging the unique circumstances of this case. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, in the days that followed, Michael's story spread beyond the hospital walls. A local newspaper ran a sensationalist article with the headline, "Fake Doctor Deceives Elite Hospital." The report twisted the facts, portraying Michael as a dangerous imposter who put lives at risk, completely omitting that his diagnosis had saved the patient. The scandal grew quickly. The hospital's board pressured for an exemplary punishment to protect the institution's reputation. Michael's family, including Uncle George, who was still awaiting surgery, faced public scrutiny. Neighbors began looking at them with suspicion, as if they were all accomplices in a grand fraudulent scheme. To make matters worse, Emily also faced consequences. Having admitted her involvement in the plan, she was under internal investigation and risked losing her medical residency. Michael felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had tried to do the right thing by confessing everything, but now it seemed that decision had only hurt more people. "Don't blame yourself so much," Mrs. Margaret said, during a visit to Michael's modest home on the outskirts of Boston. "Rigid systems always look for scapegoats when their flaws are exposed. But I really made a mistake," Michael replied, hanging his head. "Yes, you did. And do you know what it was?" The elderly woman paused. "It was doubting your own potential. If he had trusted himself from the beginning, he would have sought legitimate ways to use his knowledge." The words of his former teacher echoed in Michael's mind for days. Meanwhile, Mercy General Hospital continued deliberating about his fate without reaching a final decision. The atmosphere was one of constant tension. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Margaret, now recovered enough to resume some of her activities, began mobilizing her extensive network of contacts. As a retired professor from one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country, she knew doctors in positions of power across various hospitals and institutions. One by one, Mrs. Margaret's former students began voicing their support for Michael. They weren't defending the lie or the deception, but questioning a system that allowed someone with so much potential to be limited to roles beneath his abilities due to a lack of opportunities. The turning point came when the case reached the ears of Dr. Louise Fields, a renowned researcher and current dean of the State University's School of Medicine. Intrigued by the story, she requested access to Michael's thesis on rare metabolic syndromes. "This is at least master's-level work," she remarked after reading the paper. With proper guidance, this young man could contribute significantly to medical research. A disciplinary hearing was scheduled to officially decide Michael's fate. The entire hospital was talking about the case, with opinions divided. Some argued for severe punishment to discourage similar behavior in the future. Others, impressed by the positive outcome for Mrs. Margaret, advocated for a second chance. On the day of the hearing, the room was packed. The hospital's board of directors, composed of 5 senior doctors and 2 administrators, presided over the session. Michael, Emily, and Dr. Hendricks sat side by side, waiting for the proceedings to begin. To everyone's surprise, Uncle George, still on crutches due to his condition, insisted on attending. Despite Michael's protests, the older man was determined to be there for his nephew. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the board's chairman, Dr. Vincent Anderson, "we are here to examine an unprecedented case in our hospital. Before we begin formally, I would like to hear from Mr. Michael Thompson." Michael stood up, feeling every eye on him. His voice trembled at first but grew steadier as he spoke. He recounted the entire story again, omitting no detail, taking full responsibility for his actions, absolving Emily, and emphasizing that his only motivation had been to help his uncle and the patient. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding," he concluded. "I just want you to know that I never meant to disrespect this institution or the medical profession. On the contrary, I have deep respect for both. After his testimony, several professionals spoke up. Emily talked about how she had been impressed by Michael's knowledge from the very beginning. Dr. Hendricks highlighted the competence he had shown during Mrs. Margaret's emergency, and the patient herself, with the authority of someone who had dedicated her life to medical education, passionately argued that exceptional talents deserved exceptional paths. When it seemed everyone had had their say, Uncle George asked to speak. "Can I say something?" he asked in his rough voice. "I know I'm not a doctor and have nothing to do with this hospital, but I have something important to say." The board chairman hesitated but finally agreed. "You have 2 minutes. George adjusted his crutches and looked straight at the board members. "My nephew thinks I didn't know anything, but the truth is I always knew his potential." He paused briefly, looking at Michael, who stared back in confusion. Since he was a boy, this kid showed an unusual interest in medicine. He'd stay up nights studying borrowed books, ask questions even licensed doctors couldn't answer. George took a deep breath before continuing. "When I got this janitor job here, I saw an opportunity. I knew people in administration and asked them to issue a temporary replacement badge with broader access. I hoped eventually some doctor would notice my nephew's talent and give him a chance." A murmur of astonishment spread through the room. Michael looked at his uncle in disbelief. "Are you saying you created this situation deliberately?" asked Dr. Anderson, equally surprised. "Not the way it happened," George clarified quickly. "I never imagined he'd be mistaken for a surgeon or anything like that. I just wanted him in environments where he could show his knowledge. The rest was coincidence, or fate, if you prefer." Michael didn't know what to think. Part of him wanted to be angry at his uncle for putting him in this position, but another part understood the loving gesture behind that thoughtless action. "Uncle, you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did, Michael," George interrupted. "I watched you giving up on your dreams day after day, taking jobs far beneath your abilities. Something needed to be done." After all testimonies, the board withdrew to deliberate. The wait seemed endless. Michael, Emily, Dr. Hendricks, Mrs. Margaret and Uncle George remained together, united by a strange solidarity born from this extraordinary situation. When the board returned, everyone stood in anticipation. Dr. Anderson cleared his throat before announcing the decision. "This case forced us to re-examine not just our security policies, but also our approach to identifying and nurturing talent. After careful consideration, the board has decided the following." He opened a folder and began reading formally. "First, Mr. Michael Thompson is officially relieved of his duties as temporary janitor at this hospital." Michael's heart sank. It was all over. "Second," continued Dr. Anderson, "Mercy General Hospital, acknowledging our shared responsibility in the security lapses that allowed this situation, and considering the positive outcome for the patient, offers Mr. Thompson a full medical scholarship to complete his studies, on condition that after graduation, he works an equivalent period at this institution." Michael couldn't believe his ears. A scholarship? It was more than he'd ever dreamed. "Third, Dr. Emily Parker will receive a formal warning for not immediately reporting the situation, but considering her motivations and excellent record, there will be no interruption to her medical residency." Emily sighed in relief and discreetly squeezed Michael's hand. "Fourth, the hospital will immediately implement new security protocols and a talent identification program for staff at all levels, to be coordinated by Dr. Richard Hendricks." When the session ended, Michael was still in shock. People congratulated. Him patted his back, but he barely registered their words. It was Uncle George who brought him back to reality. "See?" said the older man, eyes glistening. "Sometimes we just need one chance to show who we really are." Michael hugged, his uncle tightly careful of the crutches. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." That evening, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Emily. "I wanted to apologize," she said plainly, "for pressuring you to keep up that charade." "No, need to apologize." I could have said no. "Still, it wasn't fair of me," she paused. "But I also wanted to say that, well, now that everything's settled, maybe we could get to know each other better. No lies this time." Michael smiled to himself. "I'd like that. Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 6 months later, Mercy General Hospital was unrecognizable, not just in its physical structure, which was undergoing renovations, but especially in its culture. The talent identification program designed by Dr. Hendricks had uncovered extraordinary skills among professionals from the most diverse fields. A cleaning assistant with a photographic memory now helped with medical records filing. A security guard with first aid experience was promoted to the emergency team. Michael, now officially enrolled in the special medical training program, divided his time between theoretical classes and supervised internships. His prior nursing knowledge and his deep study of rare conditions gave him an advantage in many subjects, but he never bragged about it. "It's strange being here as an official student after everything that happened," he commented to Emily during lunch. The two had developed a relationship that went beyond friendship. They went out together whenever their schedules allowed, and their mutual support helped them both grow professionally. "Nothing could be fairer," Emily replied. "You earned this place on merit. Sometimes I wonder if I really deserve this second chance. After all, I started with a lie." "A lie that saved a life," Emily reminded him. "Besides, what matters isn't how you started, but what you do with the opportunity now." Mrs. Margaret, fully recovered, had resumed her academic work and now regularly collaborated with Mercy General Hospital as a consultant. She became a kind of mentor to Michael, guiding him through supplementary readings and discussing clinical cases. "You have a natural gift for diagnosis," she remarked once. "You see patterns where others only see isolated symptoms." "I learned to observe details early on," Michael replied. "When you grow up with few resources, you learn to value what others discard." Uncle George's surgery had been a success, thanks to Mercy General Hospital's intervention, which covered all costs as part of the agreement. He now worked reduced hours as a maintenance supervisor, a less physically demanding role that still valued his experience. "So, how does it feel being the nephew of one of the hospital's longest-serving employees?" George joked during a family dinner. "Honored," Michael answered sincerely, "and grateful you never gave up on me." Michael's story and the transformation at Mercy General Hospital began gaining recognition beyond the institution's walls. Articles in hospital management journals discussed the case as an example of how crises, when well managed, could become opportunities for systemic improvement. Dr. Hendricks was invited to speak at medical conferences about the talent program he'd developed, always mentioning, with proper permission, the story that had served as the catalyst for all the change. Still, not everything was perfect. Some more traditionalist doctors still eyed Michael with suspicion, questioning whether he truly deserved the shortcut he'd received. In an environment as hierarchical as the hospital, any break in protocol was met with skepticism by the clinical staff. "Ignore the comments," Emily advised after witnessing a senior doctor make a snide remark about Michael. "They're just jealous because you managed to do in a week what they couldn't in months." "It's not easy," admitted Michael. "Sometimes I feel like I have to prove my worth every minute." "Welcome to the world of women in medicine," Emily Zo smiled wryly. "That feeling is familiar to a lot of people." Over time, however, even the most skeptical began to recognize Michael's value. His dedication to his studies, his humility in learning, and his genuine concern for patients gradually earned him respect. One of the most significant moments of acceptance came when Dr. William Mitchell, the actual surgeon Michael had been mistaken for, returned to the hospital for a new consultation. Instead of hostility, the doctor showed curiosity about the young man who had been his unwitting stand-in. "So, you're the famous Michael," Dr. Mitchell said when he met him in the hallway. "I'd like to read the thesis you wrote on Hadley syndrome. I have a patient in New York City with similar symptoms." That request, coming from a renowned specialist, was one of the greatest recognitions Michael could receive. As he progressed in his studies, Michael never forgot where he came from. On weekends, he volunteered at a community clinic in the neighborhood where he grew up, helping people who, like his own family, had few resources. "Why push yourself even harder when you already have so much to study?" a colleague asked, seeing him exhausted after a Sunday of volunteer work. "Because these are the people I want to be a doctor for someday," Michael replied simply. The first year of the special program passed quickly. Michael maintained exemplary grades, and his case continued to be studied as an example of how to identify talent in unexpected places. Emily, now in her final year of residency, began receiving offers from prestigious hospitals, which brought a new concern for the couple. "New York City has excellent residency programs for when you graduate," Emily remarked as they discussed the future. "We could go together." "I have a commitment here," Michael reminded her. "The scholarship requires me to work at Mercy General for a few years after graduation. I'm sure they could make an exception." "I don't want exceptions. I've had my share of those. I want to fulfill exactly what I promised." That determination to honor his commitments was one of the qualities Emily admired most in Michael. She respected his integrity, especially considering the turbulent start of his journey at the hospital. The second year of training brought new challenges. The coursework became more complex, and Michael began participating in research projects led by Mrs. Margaret, now a visiting professor at the university affiliated with the hospital. "You have the potential to be more than just a clinician," she remarked one day. "Your analytical mind would be perfect for research." "One step at a time," Michael replied, always cautious not to let ambition cloud his judgment again. It was during one of these research projects that a new opportunity arose. Studying variations of Hadley syndrome, Michael identified a pattern suggesting a possible link to another rare metabolic condition. If proven, this connection could simplify the diagnosis and treatment of both conditions. "This deserves to be published," Mrs. Margaret said, after reviewing his notes. "You should be the first author." The idea of having his name on a scientific publication was tempting, but Michael hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready. What if I'm wrong?" "That's science, young man. We make our best guesses based on the available data, and then we let other researchers confirm or refute them. It's not so different from the diagnosis you made that first night." With Mrs. Margaret's encouragement and Emily's support, Michael finally agreed to develop the scientific article. For months he divided his time between regular studies, volunteer work, and research. The nights were long, and exhaustion was constant, but there was genuine satisfaction in every completed page. The article was submitted to a renowned international medical journal, and after rigorous peer review, was accepted for publication. The news spread quickly through the hospital. "Not every medical student gets an international publication before even graduating," remarked Dr. Hendricks, proud of his protégé. "This opens many doors." Michael, however, kept his feet on the ground. "I still have much to learn before I can consider myself a real doctor." That humility, even in the face of significant achievements, was one more reason why he gradually earned the respect of even the most skeptical at the hospital. Meanwhile, Emily faced her own professional crossroads. She had received an irresistible offer for a fellowship at a prestigious hospital in Toronto, Canada. The opportunity was a dream for any young doctor, but it would mean being away from Michael for at least 2 years. "You should accept," Michael told her when she shared the news, hiding the sadness he felt. "It's the chance of a lifetime." "What about us?" Emily asked, equally anxious. "We'll find a way, we always do." The decision wasn't easy, but both knew it was the right path. Emily accepted the position in Canada, and the two committed to maintaining a long-distance relationship, with visits whenever possible. On the day of Emily's departure, the airport was crowded. Michael, Mrs. Margaret, Uncle George, and several colleagues from the hospital came to say goodbye. Tears were inevitable, but there was also a sense of hope. It wasn't goodbye, just see you soon. 2 years will pass quickly, Emily said, trying to sound confident as she hugged Michael one last time before boarding. "I'll count every day," he promised. With Emily gone, Michael threw himself even deeper into his studies and volunteer work as a way to cope with the longing. Nightly video calls became the highlight of his weeks, with the two sharing experiences, challenges and dreams. Time indeed passed faster than they expected. Michael's final year of training coincided with discussions about where he would do his medical residency. His agreement with the hospital stipulated that he would work as a general practitioner for a few years, but there was flexibility regarding specialization. "You have a talent for complex diagnoses," Dr. Hendricks observed during one of their mentoring sessions. "Internal medicine or neurology would be natural fields for you." "I've been thinking more about family medicine," Michael replied, surprising his mentor. "I want to care for people like my parents and uncle, who often don't have access to specialists." Dr. Hendricks nodded in understanding. Michael never forgot his roots, and that was one of his greatest strengths. The final months of training were intense. Between exams, supervised shifts, and finishing another scientific article, Michael barely had time to breathe. His once tidy, small apartment was now constantly cluttered with books, handouts, and notes scattered across every available surface. His nights became a blur of caffeine and studying. Often, Uncle George would find him asleep over his books at the kitchen table at dawn. "So you need to rest a little, boy," his uncle insisted. "It won't help if you get sick before graduation." "I'm almost there, Uncle," Michael would reply, rubbing his red eyes. "I can't slack off now." The pressure Michael put on himself was immense. It wasn't just about passing exams, it was about proving he deserved the chance he'd been given. Every evaluation, every shift, every case presentation was an opportunity to confirm that the hospital hadn't made a mistake by betting on him. At times, insecurity would attack him fiercely. During a particularly difficult shift in the emergency room, after making a medication dosage error, quickly corrected by his supervisor, Michael nearly collapsed in the locker room. "I don't have what it takes," he confessed to a colleague, who found him sitting on the floor, head in his hands. "Maybe this was all a mistake." "Everyone makes mistakes, Michael," the colleague replied, offering a hand to help him up. "Ask any doctor who graduated decades ago. The difference is how you react to them." That conversation stayed with him. Gradually, Michael learned to turn the pressure he felt into motivation and the fear of failure into doubled attention. His performance improved consistently, and soon he was among the top students in his class. On the eve of graduation, Mrs. Margaret invited him for coffee at her home, an elegant residence in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. The elderly woman, now fully recovered, remained as sharp and energetic as ever. "I wanted to show you something," she said, leading Michael to her study. There, on an impeccably organized shelf, was a blue folder with his name on it. "I kept all your reports, analyses, and suggestions from that first week at the hospital. Do you remember?" Michael nodded, slightly embarrassed by the memory. "How could I forget? It was the beginning of everything." "I reread these notes occasionally. You know," the professor continued, flipping through the folder, "there's a clarity of thought here, an ability to connect dots that many experienced doctors lack. That's not something easily learned, Michael. It's a gift." "You're being too generous." "No, I'm being precise." Mrs. Margaret closed the folder and looked straight at him. "Do you know why I insisted so much that you get this opportunity? Because I recognized in you something I've seen in very few students over 4 decades of teaching, the perfect combination of technical knowledge and human sensitivity." The mentor's words echoed in Michael's mind the night before the ceremony, as he carefully arranged his borrowed suit, the only one he owned, a gift from his neighbor for job interviews after his nursing graduation. On the big day, the university auditorium was packed. Families and friends of the graduates filled every available seat, and the atmosphere was celebratory. Michael, seated among his classmates, anxiously scanned the crowd for familiar faces. There they were, Uncle George, elegant in his best suit, now fully recovered; Mrs. Margaret, wearing a discreet hat and a radiant smile; Dr. Hendricks, as formal as ever but with an undeniable air of satisfaction; and, to his surprise, several hospital staff he'd met during his journey, from nurses and technicians to the cleaning lady who always offered him coffee when she found him studying late in empty rooms. The ceremony itself passed like a dream. The speeches, the oath, the applause, everything felt almost unreal to Michael. When his name was called to receive his diploma, a wave of especially enthusiastic applause echoed through the auditorium. Uncle George, visibly moved, couldn't hold back tears of pride. Mrs. Margaret, his mentor, sat in the front row, clapping enthusiastically. As he took the diploma from the dean's hands, Michael felt the weight of everything he'd lived through in recent years. From a simple misunderstanding over a name tag to the fulfillment of his greatest dream. In that piece of paper lay not just his personal achievement, but the result of the support, trust, and faith so many people had placed in him. The biggest surprise, however, came after the ceremony. While chatting with family and friends, Michael felt someone touch his shoulder from behind. When he turned around, he was face to face with Emily, who was supposedly still in Canada for another 6 months. The shock left him momentarily speechless. There she was, her hair shorter than he, remembered her skin slightly paler after months of Canadian winter, but with the same smile that could light up any room. How? He stammered, unable to believe his eyes. You really think I'd miss the graduation of the man I love? Emily smiled, pulling him into a tight hug. I got special leave. I have a whole week before I need to go back. Michael felt something unravel inside him, a tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying. Over the past few months, he'd convinced himself that maybe the long-distance relationship was cooling off, that Emily might have found someone more compatible with her new life in Toronto. Their video calls, though frequent at first, had become more spaced out and brief due to both of their hectic schedules. But seeing her here after crossing an ocean just to share this moment with him dissolved all his doubts. Without caring who might be watching, he kissed her as if trying to make up for all the lost time in a single gesture. I missed you so much, he confessed when they finally pulled apart. You have no idea how much. I have a pretty good idea, Emily replied, discreetly wiping away a tear. Because I felt the same. Uncle George approached, clearing his throat to announce his presence. So this is the famous Dr. Emily, he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. Michael talks about you so much, I feel like I'm your uncle, too. The pleasure is mine, Mr. George. I've heard a lot about you as well. Mrs. Margaret, who had been watching the scene closely, joined the group. Dr. Emily, it's so wonderful to finally meet you in person. Michael showed me pictures, but they don't do your vibrancy justice. The days that followed were the happiest Michael had experienced in a long time. Emily made sure to visit every corner of Boston that held meaning for him. They went to the public school where he had studied, the small apartment where he'd grown up after losing his parents, and even the public library where he'd spent hours studying as a teenager. This is where I figured out what I wanted to do with my life, he told her, as they walked between the bookshelves. I was 15 when I found an old book on the history of medicine. I was fascinated by the idea of helping people with knowledge and dedication. And now you've done it, Emily replied, squeezing his hand. Dr. Michael Thompson. Does it still feel strange? Like a dream I'm afraid of waking up from. On one particularly pleasant afternoon, they visited Central Park, where they sat on a bench under the shade of ancient trees. Children ran around. Dogs walked with their owners, and a group of elderly men played cards at nearby tables. What's Toronto like? Michael asked as they shared a coffee, introducing her to this New England custom. Different. Colder, more organized. The hospital is incredible, with technology we can't even imagine here. But you know what I miss? She paused, looking around. This life, this energy. People here really know how to live. Michael watched the people, in the park, something he rarely had time to do during his intense years of study. He noticed how Americans spoke loudly, laughed unreservedly, and constantly touched each other in affectionate gestures. It really was different from what he'd seen in movies about colder countries. Sometimes we don't appreciate what we have because we're so used to it, he reflected. That's exactly why international experiences are so important, Emily replied. You learn as much about your own country as you do about the place you're visiting. On the eve of Emily's return to Canada, during a special dinner Michael prepared in his small kitchen, she made an unexpected proposal. The hospital where I work offers an exchange program for newly graduated doctors, she explained, as they enjoyed a simple but lovingly made risotto. It's competitive, but with your academic record and publications you'd have a great chance. Michael paused mid-bite, surprised. An exchange? In Toronto? 6 months, Emily confirmed, excited. You'd work directly with the Rare Diagnostics team, which is world-renowned. It would be perfect for you. Michael's heart raced at the possibility. Working at a top-tier hospital, learning advanced techniques, and of course being close to Emily. It was too tempting. "But what about my commitment to Mercy General?" he asked, always mindful of keeping his promises. "I signed a contract, agreeing to work there for 3 years after graduation." Emily smiled, having anticipated this objection. "I spoke with Dr. Hendricks before coming. He thinks 6 months of international exchange would only enhance your work here later. He's willing to adjust the agreement." "You already talked to him?" Michael was genuinely surprised. "When did you find the time?" "Actually, we started planning this almost 2 months ago. I wanted to be sure it was possible before bringing it up to you." Michael fell silent for a moment, processing the information. Emily had thought of everything, moved mountains to create this opportunity for him. It was such a genuine act of love that it left him speechless. "You don't have to answer now," Emily added, noticing his hesitation. "It's a big decision. Take your time." But Michael didn't need more time. "I'd go to the moon if it meant being close to you," he replied, taking her hands in his. "But I need to be sure I'm doing this for the right reasons. I can't take another shortcut in life. I have to earn every step of the way." "And you have," Emily assured him. "No one has worked harder for it." The next few days were filled with deep reflection for Michael. He had long conversations with Uncle George, who encouraged him without hesitation. "A chance like this comes once in a lifetime, my boy. If the hospital agreed to wait, there's no reason to say no." Mrs. Margaret was equally emphatic when he sought her advice. "Medicine knows no borders, Michael. The knowledge you gain there will benefit countless patients here when you return. Besides," she added with a sly smile, "the heart needs care just as much as any other organ. Don't neglect yours." The final decision came after a heartfelt talk with Dr. Hendricks in his office. "I'll be blunt, Thompson," the director said with his usual frankness. "When Dr. Parker first presented this idea, my initial reaction was no. After all, we've just invested in your training and need your services here." Michael nodded, fully understanding that perspective. "But then I thought about our own history," the older doctor continued. "This hospital gave you a second chance when many would have dismissed your potential. It would be hypocritical now to limit your growth. So you really approve? More than that, I insist you go." The director leaned back in his chair with an almost paternal air. "On one condition, that you return not just with new knowledge, but with ideas we can implement here. We want to grow too, you know." With all the necessary blessings, Michael applied for the exchange program, backed by enthusiastic recommendation letters from his mentors. The acceptance came faster than expected. Michael Thompson's name was already known in international academic circles due to his publications on rare metabolic syndromes. Before leaving, Michael organized a meeting with everyone who had been pivotal in his journey: Uncle George, Mrs. Margaret, Dr. Hendricks, and many other professionals who had supported him along the way. The gathering took place in the event hall of Mercy General Hospital, decorated simply but with great care. "I want to thank each of you," he said, emotional after everyone had settled with their drinks. 3 years ago, I was just a temporary janitor with a distant dream. Today, I'm a doctor, about to embark on an international exchange. None of this would have been possible without your support, guidance, and especially the second chance you gave me." Dr. Hendricks raised his glass in a toast. "The real lesson of this story isn't about second chances, Michael. It's about recognizing potential where others don't see it and turning adversity into opportunity. You did that with us, just as much as we did with you." Mrs. Margaret Everwise added, "Medicine isn't just about technical knowledge, young man. It's about compassion, integrity, and the courage to admit when we're wrong. You've shown all these qualities, even in the toughest circumstances." Uncle George, in his characteristic simplicity, summed up everyone's feelings. "I'm proud of you, son. Not just for what you've achieved, but for the man you've become." In the process, there were more heartfelt speeches. Head nurse Elizabeth, the one who had unintentionally started the whole story by mistaking him for Dr. Mitchell, spoke about how Michael's case had changed her own perception of hospital support staff. "Now, I always ask the cleaning and maintenance workers about their studies and aspirations," she confessed, drawing laughter from the crowd. "I'll never underestimate anyone based on their uniform again." The celebration lasted late into the night, with stories shared, future plans discussed, and plenty of laughter and a few tears shed. For Michael, it felt like the closing of an important chapter in his life, while also preparing to begin an even more promising one. On the morning of his departure for Toronto, Michael made one last visit to Mercy General Hospital. He walked the same halls he had once cleaned as a janitor, now wearing a white coat with his name embroidered on it. The feeling was surreal, as if he were walking through two different times of his life simultaneously. He passed by the locker room where he had changed into his janitor's uniform so many times, the basement study room where he and Emily had secretly planned Mrs. Margaret's treatment, the ICU hallway where he had performed that emergency intervention that ultimately revealed his true identity. Each space held memories, lessons, emotions that had shaped who he was now. Michael occasionally touched the walls, as if he could physically feel the weight of that history imprinted in the concrete and tile. As he walked down the hallway where it had all begun, near the surgical center, he bumped into a head nurse, in a hurry. It was the same one who, years ago, had mistaken him for Dr. Mitchell. "Dr. Thompson," she greeted, recognizing him immediately. "I heard you're going to Canada." "Congratulations." "Thank you," Michael replied, smiling at the irony of the situation. "You know, I have a lot to thank you for." "Me?" she asked, confused. "A long story. Maybe I'll tell it when I return." The nurse looked intrigued, but the beeper at her waist went off and she had to rush to attend to an emergency. Michael smiled, thinking about how the hospital remained that living, pulsing organism where human dramas unfolded every minute. His final stop was the room where Mrs. Margaret had been hospitalized 3 years earlier. Now occupied by another patient, the space still seemed to hold echoes of that crucial period in his life. It was there, after all, that his theoretical knowledge had truly made a difference for the first time. Michael left the hospital that morning not as an imposter or a dreamer, but as a real doctor, qualified by his own merit, ready for the next step in his professional journey. At Logan International Airport, Uncle George insisted on accompanying him all the way to boarding, despite his difficulty walking long distances. 6 months will fly by, his uncle said, trying to hide his emotion as he hugged his nephew one last time before departure. "By the time you return, I'll have fixed up that back room for your private practice." Michael laughed, though his eyes were also misty. "I'll still be working at the hospital for a long time, Uncle. But thank you for the vote of confidence." "It's more than confidence, my boy, it's certainty. You'll do great things wherever you are." The flight to Toronto took off right on time. As the clouds gradually obscured the city of Boston, Michael reflected on the incredible path that had led him there. From a simple mix-up with an ID badge to a promising medical career, his life had taken turns he never imagined. His time in Toronto passed like an intense, enriching dream. St. Michael's Hospital, where Emily was completing her fellowship, was truly impressive in size, structure, and technological resources. In the first few days, Michael felt completely dazzled and, why not admit it, a little intimidated by the environment. The language barrier was the first challenge. Though he had studied English for years and could read scientific papers without trouble, spoken communication was another story. The Canadian accent, different from what he was used to in American movies, combined with the fast-paced hospital conversations, led to some awkward moments in the early weeks. "Take a deep breath and ask them to repeat it slower," advised Emily, who was already more adjusted. "They're used to international doctors. No one will judge you for not understanding everything right away." Gradually, Michael gained confidence and fluency. His dedication and technical knowledge soon impressed the Canadian team, especially Dr. Lawrence, head of the Complex Diagnostics Unit. "Your experience with Hadley syndrome is remarkable," the senior physician remarked after a case presentation. "We've only documented 3 cases in all of Canada, and you seem to know the condition better than many of our specialists." The exchange program allowed Michael to rotate through different specialties, but he spent most of his time in diagnostics, where rare and complex cases were referred from across the country. There, his ability to connect seemingly unrelated symptoms and propose alternative diagnoses found fertile ground. One afternoon, While reviewing test results in the residence lounge, Michael received an email from Dr. Hendricks with exciting news. Mercy General Hospital's Talent Identification Program had been selected as a finalist for a national award in hospital management innovation. The director made sure to credit Michael as the inspiration for the project. "Your story continues to inspire change here," the doctor wrote. "We've already identified 3 staff members with underutilized academic backgrounds who are now in development programs. One of them, in fact, is a security guard with a master's in biochemistry." These news filled Michael with a special kind of pride. Knowing that his experience had transcended the personal sphere to positively impact the institution and open doors for other hidden talents was deeply gratifying. Life in Toronto with Emily was equally enriching. They lived in a small apartment in the university neighborhood, close to the hospital. In their free time, they explored the multicultural city, tried foods from different countries, and adjusted to life in a place so different from Boston. "I miss the warmth of American people," Michael confessed on a particularly harsh winter night as they watched the snow fall through their apartment window. "Back home, you meet a stranger on the street, and 5 minutes later, you're sharing your life story." "And I miss the sun, coffee in the park, and that pasta place near your house," Emily replied, snuggling closer to him under the blanket. Moments like these reassured Michael they had made the right choice. Being together, sharing experiences, growing professionally side by side, it all made the challenges of adjusting worthwhile. One of the most transformative experiences of their stay was attending an international conference on rare metabolic diseases. As part of the exchange program, Michael was selected to present a scientific poster on his research. To his surprise, one of the keynote speakers cited his paper during the main presentation. This recent work by Dr. Thompson and colleagues offers an innovative perspective on early diagnosis, the renowned researcher said, displaying a slide with Michael's name. "I highly recommend reading it for anyone interested in the topic." Sitting in the audience among hundreds of specialists from around the world, Michael felt a validation he had never imagined possible. From a janitor mistaken for a doctor to an internationally recognized researcher, life could truly take extraordinary turns. As the end of their 6 months approached, Michael and Emily faced a new crossroads. She still had 6 more months of fellowship left, which would mean another separation. They discussed several options, including the possibility of Michael extending his stay, but his commitment to Mercy General Hospital weighed heavily on the decision. "I gave them my word," Michael explained during a long conversation in the small park near their apartment. "They invested in me, believed in me when no one else would. I can't just extend my absence." Emily, though visibly disappointed, understood his reasons. After all, it was that very integrity that had drawn her to him in the first place. 6 more months isn't so bad, she tried to console herself. "We've done this before. And this time, when you come back, we'll be together for good," Michael promised. "No more separations." In their final week in Toronto, St. Michael's Hospital offered Michael a tempting proposal, a permanent position on their diagnostics team after Emily's fellowship ended. The salary was impressive, several times what he'd earned back in the United States, and the working conditions were unmatched. "It's an honor," Michael told Dr. Lawrence, "but I need to fulfill my commitment back home first. Maybe in the future we can revisit this conversation." The Canadian doctor smiled with respect. "Loyalty is a rare quality these days, Dr. Thompson. Your hospital is lucky to have you. The offer will remain open when you decide you're ready." In 6 months, he would return to honor his commitment to the hospital that had given him a second chance. But he would carry with him the lessons he'd learned, Emily's love, and the determination to be not just a good doctor, but someone who made a difference in others' lives. As Mrs. Margaret had told him on his first official day as a student, sometimes the longest path is the only one worth taking. And Michael, now more than ever, understood the profound truth in those words. 5 years had passed since those transformative events. Mercy General Hospital had changed considerably, with a new wing dedicated to rare and metabolic diseases, a project Michael had helped develop after returning from Canada. The Talent Identification Program, inspired by his story, was now being replicated in other hospitals across the country and had been the subject of a nationally broadcast documentary. At 33, Michael divided his time between clinical care, academic, research, and overseeing the medical residency program. His office, a welcoming space with pastel-colored walls and a small library specializing in rare conditions, was always fully booked. Patients came from various states seeking the doctor, who sees what others miss, as he had been nicknamed in a magazine feature. A prominent photograph on the main wall showed Michael and Emily at their wedding, held 2 years earlier, in a simple ceremony at the city's botanical garden. Next to it, another photo displayed the couple with Uncle George and Mrs. Margaret, all smiling during the inauguration of the hospital's new wing. On that autumn morning, Michael was organizing his desk to begin his appointments when his secretary knocked on the door. "Dr. Michael, your first patient is here. It's a new case referred personally by Dr. Hendricks. Send them in, Betty, thank you." The door opened to reveal a young man who looked barely over 20, visibly nervous, wearing the hospital maintenance team's uniform. Michael immediately felt a strange familiarity with the scene. "Good morning," he greeted, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Michael Thompson. How can I help you?" "Good morning, doctor," the young man replied hesitantly. "My name is Jason. Dr. Hendricks said you might guide me on, well, how to pursue a career in medicine even starting from the bottom." Michael smiled, sensing a circle closing. He gestured to the chair across from his desk and sat down. "You know, Jason, I have a story to tell you. It started a few years ago in this very hospital with a young janitor and a misplaced ID. Badge and end of story. Dear listener, could you make the difficult decision Michael made? Share in the comments what you thought of this journey of perseverance and transformation. Don't forget to leave your like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel to follow other heartwarming stories that touch the soul and make us reflect on life.